This webinar on simplifying grammar with the Grammar Tree is brought to you by the Professional Development Team at Oxford University Press, Pakistan. The session outcomes include understanding the experiential learning cycle, introduction to simplifying grammar, teaching strategies to engage students in the classroom and during online teaching, active learning, practice, and reinforcement. What is experiential learning? Experiential learning involves recognizing learning needs, learning by doing, and connecting real-life experiences to learning outcomes. The experiential learning cycle was introduced by Kolb back in 1984. It begins with presenting a situation or a story or an experience to students. They get a chance to reflect on it and observe how that experience makes them feel and what they know about it. This is knowledge that they already have. Then it leads to conceptualizing different outcomes with the knowledge that they already have. They sort of learn to develop an abstract of the learning outcomes, and then they experiment with it actively so that they can recognize the gap between what they already know and what they need to learn. The experiential learning cycle is embedded in our book, The Grammar Tree. The grammar point being taught here is common and proper nouns. It is contextualized in the form of a story. Children love stories, they find them engaging and easy to connect to. Cat is the name of an animal, but cat is not a special name. If, however, you give your pet cat a special name and call it Minnie, that becomes the cat's special name. You then write the name of your cat by using a capital letter as the first letter. All the other letters are small letters. Students are then presented with a short sentence, I have a cat called Minnie. The teacher would help contextualize the story by asking students if they have a pet at home or if they've seen cats in other people's houses or stray cats out on the road. What is the difference between the cats that they see out on the road and the cats that they keep at home? One of the differences is that their pet cat might have a special name. And if it's unique and has a special name, it can be set apart from the others that they see outside their house. And that special name would be a proper noun written with a capital letter. All the others would be common nouns. Children would learn through linking the story and the discussion in class to examples from daily life. They then move on to hands-on tasks where they get to practice and experiment with what they have learned through the exercises presented in the book. Simplifying grammar implies linking learning to the student's experience. When teaching parts of speech, teachers need not necessarily name the part of speech or give an explanation. They could ask the students to look around them without naming the parts of speech prior to this activity. And ask them, for example, from Book 2, page 4, we have an exercise where students look around them and discuss what they see. So, for example, I have a box of sweets is sentence 1. This room is full of books. A little girl is playing the piano. A girl is sitting on a chair. They would look around. They would pick out common nouns from what they see around them and frame sentences for each other in a peer learning activity. She could ask the students to name as many things they see around them as possible, and then after introducing the common and the proper noun, and of course it would have to be told that proper nouns are special names as we discussed in the previous slides. We would then move on to adjectives describing what they see around them using one simple word. So they could say, for example, I see a brown desk. Brown would be the adjective. Grammar would be learned through discovery of patterns, of rules rather than explaining the rules to the students. Next, we ask the students to describe as many things around them as they can and introduce them to the concept of an adjective. Once we've done that, we might want to move on to adverbs in a similar way and verbs in a similar way using the same linking learning to experience method. So for example, students might want to have a little demonstration in the class where they do an action for us, such as jumping or singing, smiling or skipping, and other students would be asked to describe what they're doing. When they say jumping, the teacher might want to say this is a verb because this is a doing word or an action. Someone else will laugh out loud, and the students would be asked to identify the doing word. When they suggest she or he is laughing, the teacher would want to point that out and say this is a verb. Through demonstration and role play, discussion and peer learning, students can be familiarized with parts of speech much quicker than explaining the rules and having them apply them right away through exercises in the book. The exercises in the book are used for reinforcement once students have learned the concept and have retained it. To encourage active learning, we involve the students in the activities to talk about themselves. When we introduce adverbs, we might want to ask, what is it that you do well? One student might suggest, I run fast. Another student might suggest, I work cautiously. The teacher might want to use these words as a prompt as well. I eat, and suggest slow. Someone else might come up with a word like noisily, reluctantly, greedily, quietly. I play, happily. And as we move through the sentences, giving each student a chance to build upon what they know and to suggest words by learning from others around them, we can consolidate a bank of adverbs and then check the concept through the exercises given in the grammar tree. There are many other parts of speech, such as interjections, conjunctions, prepositions, and pronouns that can be taught in exactly the same way as we discussed verbs, adjectives, nouns. There are also degrees of comparisons that children would need to know to develop facility in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So for example, we have changed the form of the adjectives or adverbs given in brackets to the correct degrees of comparison. Umar speaks, fast is given in brackets, than Ali. Children would be asked to stand in perhaps a row and then make a comparison. One could be asked to jump lower than someone else who's jumping higher, and then a third student jumps the highest. In this way, we could use embodied learning in the classroom to demonstrate degrees of comparison. Once children have visualized what degrees of comparison actually means, it would be easier for them to use the words in brackets given in the exercise and be able to apply what they have experienced to the concept that they have learned. Next, we move on to introducing countable, uncountable nouns through the words much and many. We could begin with concept checking questions. For example, can you count your hair? Can you count sand or ice? Can you count time? Can you count grass? If you can't count your hair, you would use the word much for it. If you can count something such as your fingers, pencils, sharpeners, or bags, you would use the word many. We would then give them an example. Many people will be there at the party because we can count them. She does not have much love for her own dog because we cannot exactly count love. It's a concept. In the third sentence, many is used for cups, a countable noun, not for milk. Uncountable nouns can take numbers before them, but only when referring to their quantity. This is a bit of clarification that would have to be made once children have understood the concept and can apply it and use it in their own sentences. Countable and uncountable nouns can also be categorized visually for children to understand the concept with examples given, pictures, or we could use things around them that they can talk about in singular or plural. There is a book on the table. There is one book on the table because we can count the book. But if we can't count something, such as grass, then we would say there is grass on the table, not using an article a or an. There is some water in that picture because we can't count the water, we use some, but we do not use a or an when we can't count a noun. We can keep this practice ongoing by giving children more and more sentences to help them practice the concept before we asking them to do a quick check or an assessment, such as on page 17, book 1. The quick checks and assessments are extremely effective for teachers to understand how to monitor learning as they go along. We could also teach the concept through a formative assessment, such as a grammar game in the class, so that the teacher can have a fairly good idea of how many children have grasped the concept and how many are still struggling with it. So for example, do countable nouns have a or an? You could say a sentence wrong and have them corrected for you. Say it incorrectly is the name of the game, and then listen closely to each other. Or they could trick each other by either saying it correct or saying it incorrectly and having their partner, the person who sits next to them, guess whether it's correct or incorrect. For example, I have an idea. Is that correct or incorrect? Students can test each other like that before they move on to the quick check assessment on page 17. Building on the basics, we move on to books 3 and 4, where we have a snowball activity. Ask the students to write their words on small pieces of paper and throw them into the center. The idea is to collect enough adverbs for each child to take one home. So, if we're teaching adverbs, for example, and they are now in a position to write a full sentence, we might ask them to write a sentence with an adverb in it. For example, I ran fast, or I smiled happily. A short sentence will do. This is for them to practice the parts of speech that has been taught. The paper could be crumpled into a snowball, thrown into the center, and then picked up by someone else who would add to the sentences using different adverbs for practice. Students can then consolidate their sentences in this way, get ample practice for using the adverb and writing sentences with the adverbs in it, and share it with the rest of the class in a sort of presentation. So what we have at the end of the day is consolidating the part of speech, teaching children to write structured sentences, and building a vocabulary bank at the same time. We will also be developing facility in the language by giving children opportunity to share what they've written with the rest of the class. We can now move on to more complex grammar once children have developed facility with the basics of grammar points and functions, and help them discover more rules in the patterns that they see and read. So for example, he has written many lovely books. The continuous tenses are never used to denote actions that you do almost every day. To denote such actions, we use the present tense. If you want to say that somebody drinks milk every morning, you should not say he is drinking milk every morning. Now this is a grammar point that is a common error among speakers of English as a second language. This book points out those particular common errors that come with the particular cultural use of language. He drinks milk every morning would denote that this is an activity that is done every morning. He is drinking milk would be an activity that is being done at that particular moment in time. Students would need to practice reading this and replicate the sentences using their own words and using their own concept for them to be able to grasp the difference between he is drinking milk and he drinks milk every morning. To check the concepts, teachers might want to take students through a quick reflection where they work in pairs through the exercises given in the grammar tree book. These exercises take about 2 or 3 minutes each. Next, they would be asked to formulate their own sentences using the grammar point that has been taught, and the teacher might want to use some concept checking questions to start the students off with an example or a question. Again, that would be about 2 to 3 minutes. Next, she or he would like to give students an opportunity to teach or present their work to the rest of the class. This is particularly useful in developing fluency in the language and also confidence to share work with the rest of the peers. The course components of the Grammar Tree 2nd edition, books 1 to 8, include a step-by-step gradation of grammar topics for easy assimilation of the concepts. There are formative assessments to test learners' understanding of concepts. We also have checkpoints that can be used as assessments for learning as the teacher goes along. Small manageable units to help teachers and learners navigate through grammar concepts easily and in a very simplified way. There's revision and recapitulation of grammar topics after the completion of each unit so that topics can be revisited and reinforced. There's also a little revision box on the pages to revisit the concepts just to make sure that the children have indeed grasped it. And there are end-of-year tests in every section covering all the material that has been taught throughout the year. There is special focus on spelling with word lists from books 1 to 3. There are comprehension chapters to foster reading skills and to show the use of grammar in context, and composition chapters structured to help learners write independently in different formats. Our teaching guides are freely downloadable from www.oup.com.bk. These have an introduction to teaching each unit in a simplified, easy and effective manner. It explains how the grammar tree can be used to get the best out of the book. It explains the detailed contents, activities and tasks that can be used in the classroom. It also gives the answer keys to the exercises in the Grammar Tree student book and the key to the end-of-year assessments. There are worksheets. There's an answer key to all the worksheets given. There's also a key to the checkpoints in every unit, and there are delayed post-tests in the teacher's guide as well. The breakup of timings for the lessons is also suggested in the teaching guide. Exploring background knowledge would be about 5 minutes. Moving on to discussion-based or practice-based learning, where learners solve exercises in groups, individually, or with their peers. 25 minutes for that. Moving on to reflection and assessment would take about 10 minutes. All the assessments and all the monitoring that is required to be done in the classroom is explained in a structured and systematic way in the Grammar Tree teaching guide, making it very easy, effective, and useful for teachers. Also, the tasks and activities that are suggested in the teaching guide will make your teaching effective, engaging, and fun for your students. Here is an example of revision and recap of grammar topics from the teaching guide for Book 3. There's a checkpoint which can be used to monitor revisit, and assess learning. There's also an answer key provided for all the exercises given in the student books. We have let's remember for the articles to revisit the concept of a and an, and then let's revise to recap what has been taught. Reading, speaking, and writing using the grammar tree involves predicting what the text is going to be all about, making connections through class discussions, visualizing using illustrations, pictures, and posters given in the book, summarizing the text right after we've read it to identify all the key points and then to discuss them and revisit them, question what we know and what we wish to know, so students would be encouraged to frame questions of their own and then respond to the questions given in the exercises, and then monitoring through checkpoints and end-of-year tests. Reading strategies in the grammar tree include predicting, inferring, visualizing, summarizing, making connections, asking questions, and giving a personal response to the questions asked. Here's a small passage. Cat is the name of an animal, but cat is not a special name. If, however, you give your pet cat a special name and call it Minnie, that becomes the cat's special name. You then write the name of your cat by using a capital letter as the first letter. All the other letters are small letters. Children are presented with this story to contextualize the grammar point common and proper nouns, as well as the use of capital letters. They will then distinguish between Minnie the special cat and cats in general that would be identified as a common noun and written with small letters. Children would be encouraged to link the story to their own personal experiences and talk about pet cats or any other pet animal that they might have at home. And then they would read this short passage, summarize the key points in it, make connections with daily life examples from their own experience, ask questions about common and proper nouns, and then personally respond to this text by answering the questions given to them. When grammar is taught in context, children learn grammar patterns through reading and comprehension. They learn to recognize these patterns, they retain the use of the grammar point, and then they learn to practice it through speaking and listening in the classroom. They understand the structure and form when it is reinforced and when it is given to them in the form of a concept checking question. The function has to be placed in a realistic context for children to be able to connect with the learning. There could also be an explanation or a demonstration to go along with it, examples and exercises to reinforce what they have learned. The stages of reading can be practiced, for example, through the comprehension passage on the screen, Back from the Brink. Children would be asked to predict what back from the brink could be all about. What does back from the brink mean? Does it mean that there was some kind of danger? Does it mean that the situation could have fallen in either direction, in favor of someone or against someone? And then perhaps teachers could ask them to read just the first paragraph to get a feel of what this narrative is about. There are MCQs following the different stages of reading that we take children through. We discuss and then link what they read to their own experiences and then perhaps identify the key points in the passage. Having done all of that and having done with the difficult vocabulary as we go along, we then give them questions in the form of MCQs and open-ended questions for critical thinking skills as well. So for example, what kind of a person was Ayman? What kind of a person was Ayman would get different answers from each student because each student would obviously think and speak about Ayman from their own perspective. What was Ayman worried about is a low-order thinking question, which has a correct or an incorrect answer. There can only be one answer to what she was worried about. But what kind of person was Ayman is a higher order thinking skill because it requires deep thought, and every student can come up with their own answer to it. Next, we move on to helping children write something using the passage as a reference. In not more than 60 words, describe how Ayman dealt with the sad news and overcame it. This would be retelling the narrative in the form of a summary. We then move on to practicing some grammar. Read the following sentences and fill in the blanks with the correct form of the verbs given in the brackets. They could use an example from the passage, understand how the grammar function works there, contextualize it, link it to what they know, and then try and use that as reinforcement to answer these two sentences given. If I, in brackets, know that I was going to die, I would have spent more time on myself and my loved ones. This is something the teacher can help them through, they can help them with by engaging them in class discussion, and then a concept of the past, present, and future. Types of writing practice that we can engage children in are letters, dialogues, diary entries, essays, autobiographies, and stories. It's important for them to realize that each different genre of writing requires a different style and structure. It has a different flavor, it has a different tone, and different levels of formality. Learning to structure sentences and paragraphs would be the building blocks of writing. It starts with visual texts where we use posters, pictures, or just the imagery from a passage to help students come up with a setting, a context that they want to write about. Next, children would be asked to develop a vocabulary bank, come up with words that they might want to use in their paragraph. They could also refer to words that are already present in the passages given to them in the grammar tree. They move on to the grammar function that they're going to use. Perhaps the teacher could start them off if, for example, they are being asked to use the present continuous, I am going. She might want to start them off with 3 or 4 sentences with I am going or he is going, and then ask them to continue that in different ways. The punctuation is what is dealt with next when they learn to read what they write. Where there is a pause, they know they've got to put a comma. They also know where there is additional information that has to be brought into a sentence, that it would be an embedded clause within 2 commas. They would learn all of this as they go along and learn to read what they write aloud so that they know where the punctuation is needed. And next, teachers can move them on to more complex styles of writing with figurative language and the use of metaphors, similes, or idioms. Writing strategies in the grammar tree include, for example, we're giving them paragraph and diary writing. It explains that a paragraph is a short, independent passage containing one principal idea at its center. Children would be asked to think about what they want to write. For example, a sample paragraph is given here, the importance of reading as a habit. Teachers might want to discuss this and the key points in the passage. Take them sentence by sentence through the style of writing and introducing the topic and what we want to say about it. We might also want to point out that there are always 2 sides to a coin. So when we talk about the importance of reading as a habit, reading could have positives and it could also have negatives. Can the children think about anything negative about reading? If they can, they must write it down, because analyzing a topic topic involves looking at it from many different angles. Next, we move on to exercise A. Write a paragraph of not more than 150 words on the following topics. You may use the ideas given. So here, trees are our best friends. To start children off, there is a list of phrases here connected to trees. They could use those ideas and build a context and a setting, perhaps in a group or with the person sitting next to them, in a pair, in a think, share, pair, share activity. Once they're done with that preliminary exercise, they move on to writing a paragraph on one of the topics given. The importance of sports in education, for example, or the role of technology in school life. Here they would be encouraged to use their own experience and write about it with a personal response to the topic. We also have visual learning here, where we look carefully at the picture and try and write a paragraph about what's going on. Children could be encouraged to use emotive language here, look closely at the expressions of the people involved and try and read their expressions to see how they feel. Are they excited? Are they happy? Do you think they're planning another activity? Are they out for a picnic because it's a good day, or are they trying to pass time, solve an issue? What do you think the girl is telling the others in her family? We could bring in a multisensory approach and talk about describing what we see, what we hear, what we can smell, what we can touch, what we can feel. We can feel a lot of sunshine on the faces or on the backs of the people given in the picture. We can also see a lot of trees in the background. We know it's a good day. We know it's a calm day. We don't see a storm. We could link the weather to how the people in the picture feel, talk about what they're eating and why they're out for a picnic. Are they celebrating something? Is it a special day? We might want to ask all these questions as prompts to start the students off. The target pyramid of writing, for example, would include having the students learn to develop their ideas within a context, make a setting before they plunge into the main idea of the composition. They would also be encouraged to develop a vocabulary bank of words that they want to use in their composition and the grammar points that they need to be careful of. Also, being able to use a variety of sentences is important. Sentences need not be the same length. Some are short, some are long and complex. Creating links between paragraphs is important, and the use of connectives here would be especially useful for students learning to develop a flow in their writing. Then they could move on to punctuation and spelling, where they would learn complex spelling rules and be careful of how they use the words that they use. The punctuation comes through learning how to reread what we write or revisit what we write, so that we understand where the pauses lie and where the sentences are not connecting with each other, or where one sentence ends and another has to start because we've moved on to a new thought. Lastly, we've got to teach them nuances of the language by being able to use it in a stylistic or figurative way. End-of-year tests are very effective and useful because teachers really don't have to make tests of their own. They can pull them out of the teaching guide and use them as summative assessments in class. Thank you. If you wish to register for a webinar for your teachers, please contact us at pd.pk@oup.com.